The late afternoon sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets of Brooklyn Heights. Keanu Reeves wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and glanced down at Buddy, the muscular pit bull trotting loyally by his side. The dog's tongue lolled out, his breaths quick and shallow from the summer heat. "All right, Bud, let's find you some water," Keanu murmured, ruffling Buddy's head. The pit bull's tail gave a wag, trusting that his human would take care of him. Keanu had been in New York for weeks, filming the latest installment of John Wick. The role was physically demanding, but the hardest part was being away from his own dog. Spending time with Buddy, the well-trained canine actor from set, was the next best thing. Their bond had grown naturally, one forged through early morning rehearsals, long walks between takes, and quiet moments of companionship. As they wandered through the neighborhood, Keanu spotted a small square where an old-fashioned water fountain gurgled beside a line of parked motorcycles. It was right outside a bar named Iron and Ash, a dimly lit, graffiti-tagged biker joint that reeked of beer, gasoline, and something slightly more dangerous. Keanu hesitated for a moment, but then shrugged. A public fountain is a public fountain. He led Buddy toward it, unhooking the small collapsible bowl he always carried. As he filled it up, a low, gravelly voice broke the silence. "That's a damn fine dog you got there." Keanu looked up to see a man in a leather vest leaning against a motorcycle. His arms were covered in faded tattoos, and a thick, silver ring glinted on his knuckle as he took a drag from his cigarette. He was older, probably in his 50s, with deep lines around his eyes and a knowing smirk on his lips. Keanu offered a polite nod. "Thanks." The man exhaled a plume of smoke and tapped his cigarette against his boot. "Pit bulls. Misunderstood, ain't they? Just like us." Keanu glanced around. A few other bikers were gathered near the bar's entrance, watching their exchange with quiet interest. The air carried an undercurrent of tension, something unspoken but palpable. "Yeah," Keanu said evenly. "They get a bad rap." The older biker chuckled. "That they do. Some folks see nothing but trouble when they look at one. But it ain't the dog, it's the owner that makes the difference." Keanu wasn't sure if the man was being friendly or issuing some kind of veiled message. He decided not to linger. "Thanks for the chat," he said, grabbing Buddy's leash. "Stay cool out here." The biker gave a slow nod but didn't say anything else. As Keanu turned to leave, the tension followed him, clinging to the air like the lingering scent of cigarette smoke. He had a feeling that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. As Keanu and Buddy stepped away from the bar, the creak of an old screen door swinging open caught his attention. A woman in her mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, stepped out onto the bar's porch. She wore a black tank top and ripped jeans, but what stood out the most was the wariness in her hazel eyes. "Hey," she called, her voice low but urgent. Keanu paused. She glanced toward the bikers still watching from the shadows. Then, with a soft smile, she crouched and reached out a hand toward Buddy. The pit bull, always friendly, sniffed her fingers before licking them. "You're a good boy," she murmured, scratching behind Buddy's ears. Then she stood and looked at Keanu. "You shouldn't hang around here too long." Keanu frowned. "Why's that?" Her gaze flickered toward the bikers again, then back to him. "Some of them are decent enough. But others," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "they don't take kindly to outsiders. Especially ones who look like they don't belong." Keanu studied her. There was something in the way she spoke, a quiet urgency, a hint of fear carefully masked by casual concern. Before he could press further, a loud argument erupted from inside the bar. The door swung open again, and two men stumbled out, one gripping the other by the collar. "I said drop it, Maggie," one of them growled. Keanu recognized the man from earlier, the biker who had been talking to him. The younger one he held by the collar was struggling, his face red with anger. Maggie, the woman who had just warned Keanu, immediately stepped between them. "Enough, Brick," she snapped. "Not in front of the customers." Brick, the older biker, scowled but let the younger man go. "Get inside," he ordered. The younger biker spat on the ground before storming back into the bar. Brick turned his attention to Keanu, his smirk returning. "Still here?" Keanu met his gaze without flinching. Was just leaving. Brick chuckled and took a step closer, lowering his voice. Good idea. The warning was clear. Keanu nodded at Maggie. Take care. She gave him a barely perceptible nod in return. With that, Keanu led Buddy away, not bothering to look back. But he knew, without a doubt, that eyes were still watching him as he walked away. The tension from iron and ash still lingered as Keanu and Buddy made their way to a small cafe a few blocks away. Unlike the biker bar, this place was welcoming. Its outdoor seating filled with locals sipping iced coffees and chatting beneath the shade of large umbrellas. Keanu took a seat near the window, tying Buddy's leash to the chair beside him. A moment later, a familiar voice greeted him. Guess I owe you a proper welcome. He looked up to see Maggie standing there, holding a notepad. You work here too? Keanu asked. She shrugged. I pick up shifts where I can. Keanu glanced toward iron and ash in the distance. Doesn't seem like the best place to work. She sighed. It's complicated. Before he could ask more, Buddy let out a low, warning growl. Keanu turned just in time to see a shadow move. A second later, thud. Buddy yelped in pain as a sharp kick landed against his ribs. The cafe fell silent. Keanu's head snapped toward the culprit. It was one of the bikers from earlier, standing a few feet away with a cruel smirk. Keanu shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the pavement. His fists clenched. His usually calm blue eyes burned with something dark and dangerous. Did you just kick my dog? The biker's smirk widened. What if I did? Keanu took a step forward. The air around them grew thick with tension. The man's smirk faltered. For the first time, he seemed to realize who he was dealing with. And that was when everything started to spiral out of control. For a long, tense moment, no one in the cafe moved. The air crackled with silent electricity. Keanu's fists clenched at his sides, his breath controlled but slow, an unmistakable signal that he was on the verge of action. The biker, a lanky man with greasy blonde hair and a cocky smirk, stood his ground, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his worn-out leather jacket. He had no idea what kind of storm he was toying with. Keanu took a step forward, voice low and measured. You kicked my dog. The biker scoffed, tilting his head. Relax, man. Just a dog. Maybe he was in my way. Buddy let out a soft whimper and shifted uncomfortably at Keanu's feet, his ribs rising and falling a little too quickly. That was it. Before the biker could blink, Keanu closed the distance between them in a fluid motion, grabbing a fistful of the man's vest and yanking him forward. The biker's smirk vanished as he found himself staring into a pair of steel-cold blue eyes that had seen more fights than he ever would. The cafe crowd collectively held its breath. Keanu's voice was barely above a whisper, but every word cut like a blade. You don't mess with a man's dog. The biker swallowed, realizing too late that he had seriously miscalculated. But then, in a desperate attempt to regain control, he chuckled under his breath. You sure you want to do this, Hollywood? He taunted. You don't know who you're dealing with. Keanu didn't flinch. His grip tightened. Neither do you. At that moment, Maggie rushed in, placing a firm hand on Keanu's arm. Keanu, don't, she pleaded, her voice filled with urgency. Not here. Not now. Keanu didn't look away from the biker's face, reading every flicker of arrogance, every trace of uncertainty. He was dangerously close to teaching this guy a lesson he wouldn't forget. But Maggie was right. If Keanu threw the first punch, things could spiral out of control fast. He wasn't afraid of a fight, but Buddy needed him more than this lowlife did. With a slow, controlled exhale, Keanu released his grip. The biker stumbled back a step, his smirk returning, not from confidence, but from relief. He straightened his vest, then sneered. This ain't over. Then he turned on his heel and walked away. Keanu watched him go, muscles still tense with restrained anger. He had no doubt that guy would be back, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. But at that moment, Keanu had a far more pressing concern. He crouched beside Buddy, running his hands carefully along the dog's side. You okay, bud? He murmured. Buddy gave a small wag of his tail, but winced when Keanu's fingers pressed against his ribs. Maggie knelt beside them. Let me get some water, she offered. Keanu nodded, though something in his gut told him this wasn't just about the kick. There was something off. And a minute later, his worst fears were confirmed. As Maggie returned with a bowl of fresh water, Buddy dipped his head to drink, but then, suddenly, his whole body shuddered. His legs wobbled. His breaths turned ragged. And then, to Keanu's horror, Buddy collapsed onto the pavement. Buddy! Keanu's voice was sharp, urgent. He knelt, cradling the pit bull's head in his hands. Buddy's eyes were still open, but they were unfocused, his tongue lolling weakly to the side. People in the cafe gasped, some rising from their chairs. A waiter rushed over. What's wrong with him? Maggie asked, eyes wide with panic. Keanu's heart pounded. He had seen dogs suffer heat exhaustion before, but this wasn't that. This was something far worse. Buddy's body gave a sudden violent tremor. Keanu's stomach clenched. No, 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 no. Maggie, he said, his voice like steel. He's been poisoned. She paled. What? Keanu didn't waste another second. He scooped Buddy up in his arms, ignoring the sharp pain in his own shoulder from the dog's weight, and surged to his feet. Where's the nearest vet? He demanded. Maggie snapped out of her shock. 2 blocks up. Bright Paws Animal Clinic. That was all Keanu needed to hear. He ran. Every second felt like a countdown to disaster. His boots pounded the pavement. People turned to stare as he sprinted past, but he didn't care. Buddy was convulsing now, his body twitching involuntarily. Keanu tightened his grip. Stay with me, Bud, he murmured, his voice breaking just slightly. Just hold on. By the time he reached the clinic, his lungs burned and his arms ached, but he didn't slow. He threw open the doors with his shoulder, nearly colliding with the receptionist. Poison dog, he barked. He needs help now. The staff reacted instantly. A vet tech rushed forward, taking Buddy from Keanu's arms, and disappeared into the emergency room. And just like that, Keanu was left standing alone in the waiting area, his hands shaking, his breath coming in short bursts. He clenched his fists. This wasn't just some cruel prank. This was a deliberate attack. Someone had tried to kill Buddy, and Keanu was going to find out who. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then an hour. Keanu sat in the waiting room, elbows on his knees, fingers laced together. Every few minutes, he glanced at the door where Buddy had been taken. He had faced high-speed chases, gunfights, and near-death experiences in movies. But this? Sitting here, helpless, waiting for news? This was worse. Maggie arrived not long after, her face lined with worry. She sat beside Keanu, silent at first, then softly said, "The guy from earlier. The one who kicked Buddy. Do you think he did this?" Keanu didn't hesitate. Yes. Maggie swallowed hard. Then you need to know something. He turned to her, his sharp gaze demanding answers. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in. That biker gang? The ones from Iron and Ash? They're into more than just bar fights. Her voice dropped lower. Drugs. Illegal fights. And if they see someone as a threat, they make that problem disappear. Keanu's jaw tightened. Before he could say more, the exam room door swung open. A veterinarian, a woman in her 40s with a tight ponytail and a serious expression, stepped out. "Mr. Reeves," she said. Keanu shot to his feet. "How is he?" She hesitated for half a second, just long enough for Keanu's stomach to drop, before answering. "He's stable, but he's not out of danger yet." Keanu exhaled, barely realizing he had been holding his breath. "We found traces of rat poison and narcotics in his system," the vet continued. "Someone did this on purpose." Keanu's hands curled into fists. Maggie saw the look on his face and whispered, "What are you going to do?" Keanu turned toward the door, his expression set in stone. "Find them," he said, "and make them pay." The words from the vet echoed in Keanu's mind like a drumbeat. Rat poison. Narcotics. It wasn't random. Someone had deliberately targeted Buddy, and Keanu wasn't going to let it slide. The thought of that cruel biker kicking Buddy just before the poisoning made his blood boil. As the clinic staff continued to monitor Buddy, Keanu stepped outside into the cool night air, needing to clear his mind. He pulled his phone from his pocket, dialing the number of his old friend Sheriff Hank Morrison. It only rang twice before Hank picked up. "Keanu?" Hank's gravelly voice greeted him. "What's going on?" Keanu wasted no time. "Hank, I need your help. Someone's poisoning animals around Brooklyn, and I need to find out who's behind it. Buddy's in bad shape right now. They tried to kill him." There was a pause on the other end before Hank spoke again, his tone serious. "That's not good. I know the area well. You think it's connected to that biker gang you ran into?" Keanu's gut told him it was. "I think they're more than just a gang of troublemakers. They're involved in illegal fights, drug deals, who knows what else. And now they're targeting animals." "I've heard rumors," Hank admitted. "Iron and Ash. That's their hangout. I'll get my team on it. We'll look into the gang's activities, but I need more from you. We need a plan." Keanu leaned against the clinic wall, his gaze fixed on the neon lights flickering in the distance. "I'm going to confront them, but I need backup. I'm not walking into that bar without a plan. I'll have my people ready. Just say the word when you're ready to move." Hank's voice dropped to a quiet, reassuring tone. "We'll get these guys, Keanu. Just don't do anything reckless." Keanu's grip on the phone tightened. "I won't, but I need to end this." They exchanged a few more words before Keanu hung up. He took a moment to calm himself, his thoughts swirling in a haze of anger and worry. What kind of person would poison a dog just for fun? And what kind of sick, twisted gang would make animals their target? Keanu's focus sharpened. He had to act fast. Keanu didn't waste another minute. After a brief check on Buddy, who was still under observation but showing signs of improvement, he set out toward Iron and Ash with a sense of purpose burning within him. The biker bar loomed ahead like a dark fortress, its flickering neon sign casting an ominous glow onto the cracked sidewalk. As Keanu approached, he felt the familiar weight of his own instincts guiding him. He wasn't just going into that bar to confront a few bikers. He was going in to shut down an operation. He stepped through the door, the heavy wooden frame creaking under his weight. The noise inside dropped for a moment as everyone turned to size him up. Keanu's expression was cold, unreadable, and his presence alone made the atmosphere shift. The bar wasn't much different from the last time he'd been here. Dark, smoky, and heavy with tension. The scent of stale beer and burnt leather lingered in the air. But this time, Keanu wasn't there for a drink or idle conversation. He was there for answers. He scanned the room, his eyes locking onto a familiar face. The same biker who had kicked Buddy stood at the bar, nursing a beer. The cocky smirk was back on his face, but this time it was laced with a hint of uncertainty, like he wasn't sure what Keanu was going to do next. Keanu didn't waste any time. He walked straight toward the man, his footsteps purposeful and heavy, the sound of them echoing through the bar. The biker turned, raising an eyebrow. "You again?" Keanu didn't respond immediately. He grabbed the man by his vest, pulling him close until their faces were inches apart. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of someone who had fought battles and survived worse than this. "You think this is just about a dog?" Keanu's eyes narrowed. "You made a mistake today, and now I'm here to collect." The biker laughed, a hollow sound that didn't quite match the uncertainty in his eyes. "You really don't get it, do you, Hollywood? You think you can just walk in here and start throwing around threats? This is our turf." Keanu's grip tightened, the tension rising. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to make you understand the cost of messing with what's mine." The biker stiffened, but before the situation could escalate any further, a voice called out from across the room. "Mac." It was the bar's bartender. He waved his hand, signaling the biker to back off. "Let's not make this any worse, all right?" The biker, Mac, glared at Keanu but reluctantly stepped back. "This ain't over, Reeves." Keanu didn't take his eyes off Mac. He turned and walked toward the exit, every muscle in his body coiled tight, ready for whatever came next. Outside, he pulled out his phone and dialed Hank. "It's time." The sheriff's voice came through immediately. "We're ready. Let's do this." Keanu walked back to his car, his mind focused on the task at hand. The plan was set. He had the backup he needed, and now it was time to move. With Hank's team waiting outside, Keanu knew they had the element of surprise. The bikers wouldn't see it coming. As he approached Iron and Ash again, Keanu took a deep breath. This time, he wasn't walking in as just an actor or a concerned dog owner. He was a man on a mission. He stepped inside, his eyes immediately sweeping the room. His heart rate remained steady, but his senses were alert. There were more bikers here tonight, and their eyes lingered on Keanu as he moved through the bar. But Keanu didn't flinch. He made his way to the back, where he saw the same employee he had noticed earlier. A skinny kid, clearly terrified of the bikers, trying to blend into the background. Keanu approached him casually, offering a sympathetic smile. "Hey, man," Keanu greeted, his voice low. "You okay?" The kid looked up, his eyes wide. I don't know what you're talking about." Keanu lowered his voice further. "You're in trouble, aren't you? I know about the fights, the deals, the way these guys work. You don't have to be scared. Help me out, and I'll get you out of here." The kid hesitated, then nodded quickly. "They're bad news. They've been running fights, smuggling drugs, they've been doing worse stuff, too. But I don't want any part of it." Keanu's eyes darkened. "You don't have to help me, but you're not alone in this. I'll make sure you're safe, all right?" The kid nodded, his shoulders slumping in relief. Just as Keanu turned to leave, he spotted Mac again. The biker's eyes narrowed when he saw Keanu talking to the kid. Keanu's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. He walked toward the exit, already making the signal to Hank's team. Seconds later, the sound of sirens cut through the night air. The bikers' faces twisted in confusion as the law descended on the bar. Keanu stepped back, watching the chaos unfold. As Hank's team stormed in, Keanu stayed on the sidelines, his expression unreadable. The bikers didn't stand a chance. Keanu wasn't just there for Buddy. He was there to bring an end to the gang's reign of terror. And with one well-placed takedown, he was one step closer. The bar was a battleground now, chaos erupting as the bikers realized they were under siege. Keanu, standing just outside the main entrance, watched as Hank's team moved swiftly, taking down the bikers one by one. The sirens had been a warning shot, but Keanu knew that the Real storm had just arrived. Mac, still holding his beer, stood frozen, his smug grin fading. He turned toward Keanu, a mixture of confusion and anger flooding his face. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Keanu's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You don't mess with a man's dog." Mac's cocky demeanor faltered, his body stiffening as the reality of the situation sank in. Keanu didn't move, his gaze unwavering, and the tension was palpable. It was the kind of moment that only came in films, silent, charged with the weight of something larger than the fight at hand. Mac's eyes darted toward the door, where Hank and his team were systematically rounding up the bikers. His defiant smirk briefly returned, but it lacked conviction. Keanu was ready for whatever came next, but he didn't need to lift a finger. The law was there, and the gang's reign of terror was about to be over. One of the sheriff's deputies approached Keanu, nodding in acknowledgement. "We got them. They won't be causing trouble anymore." Keanu didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on Mac, who was now struggling against two deputies trying to cuff him. The smirk had disappeared, replaced by a sense of desperation. He knew, deep down, that it was over. Keanu took a step back, his eyes never leaving the scene. This wasn't about personal vengeance anymore. It was about sending a message, not just to the bikers, but to anyone who thought they could get away with cruelty. "I'll make sure the animals are safe," Keanu murmured to himself. He turned to leave, knowing that justice had been served. The bikers were in custody, but the road to closure for Buddy was far from finished. The police had secured the entire bar, with most of the bikers cuffed and sitting on the ground, their defiant postures crushed under the weight of the law. Keanu stood at the edge of the scene, his gaze flickering over the chaos, watching as the sheriff's team took charge. But there was no satisfaction in his victory. His mind was elsewhere. Buddy. Keanu's pulse quickened as he pulled out his phone, dialing the veterinary clinic. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity, each ring intensifying the tension in his chest. Finally, Dr. Harper's voice came through, calm but with an undercurrent of concern. "Keanu, we've got good news. Buddy's stable. He's out of immediate danger." Keanu let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief flooded through him, But the exhaustion of the day, of the fight, the confrontation, was still heavy. "Thank God," he muttered under his breath. "I'm coming right over." He hung up, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders, but only slightly. The battle with the bikers was won, but Buddy's recovery was just beginning. Keanu wasn't sure if he could let himself relax yet. As he walked back toward his car, Hank approached him, his expression grim but satisfied. "You did good today, Keanu. I know you were looking for justice for Buddy, but you've done more than that. These guys won't be a problem anymore." Keanu nodded, but his thoughts remained on Buddy. "I'll see to it that they stay down." He paused, looking Hank in the eye. "Thanks for backing me up. I couldn't have done it without you." Hank clapped him on the shoulder. "We've got your back. You know that." As Keanu drove to the clinic, the weight of the day started to settle in. He couldn't forget what had happened at Iron and Ash, but he also couldn't shake the image of Buddy lying in that hospital bed. The dog had been through hell, and now Keanu was determined to be there for him in every way possible. The clinic had quieted down by the time Keanu arrived, the bustle of the emergency room replaced with a calm that felt oddly surreal after the chaos of the past few hours. Keanu walked down the sterile hallway, each step heavy with anticipation. When he finally reached the recovery room, his heart skipped a beat. Buddy was lying on the bed, his body still but breathing steadily. Dr. Harper was beside him, monitoring his vitals. As Keanu approached, she turned with a smile. "He's doing much better, Keanu. It's going to take some time, but he's strong. He's made it through the worst of it." Keanu's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and love as he knelt beside Buddy's bed, running a hand through the dog's fur. "You've got a long road ahead, Buddy," he whispered, the words soft but filled with meaning. Buddy's eyes flickered open, and for the first time in hours, Keanu saw a glimmer of recognition in them. A slow wag of his tail followed, tentative but real. "That's it," Keanu murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Come on, Buddy. You're going to be all right. We'll get through this." As he sat there, watching his dog slowly recover, Keanu thought back to everything that had happened. His confrontation with the bikers, the takedown of the gang, and the fear that had gnawed at him every time Buddy's condition worsened. It wasn't just about Buddy anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Later that night, local news stations reported on the police raid at Iron and Ash, praising the swift action taken by law enforcement to rid the neighborhood of dangerous criminals. Keanu knew the story would eventually leak, but he wasn't interested in the spotlight. This was never about fame or recognition. It was about ensuring that animals like Buddy, and people like him, were safe in a world that sometimes seemed indifferent to their suffering. The news cameras would soon fade away, and the press would move on to the next story. But Keanu wasn't concerned about that. What mattered most now was the bond between him and Buddy. That bond had been tested, but it had proven unbreakable. As the dog stirred beside him, Keanu smiled, his hand resting gently on Buddy's back. Together, they would rebuild, one step at a time. The fight was over, but the journey was just beginning. As the days passed, Keanu and Buddy settled into a new rhythm. The chaos of the past seemed like a distant memory now, but the lessons learned from those turbulent days remained etched in their hearts. Keanu had fought for justice, not just for Buddy, but for the many others who had suffered at the hands of those who believed they could act without consequence. Buddy's recovery was slow, but steady. With every wag of his tail, every joyful bark that echoed through the apartment, Keanu knew they were both healing, in more ways than one. Their bond had been tested, but it had grown even stronger. Keanu kept his promise. He worked tirelessly, both in the public eye and behind the scenes, to ensure that no one, human or animal, would ever face the kind of cruelty Buddy had endured. And as for Buddy, his days of suffering were behind him. He was now the embodiment of resilience, a reminder of the strength that could be found in the most unlikely of places. The world had tried to break them, but they had refused to be broken. In the quiet moments, when Buddy rested his head on Keanu's lap, the two of them understood something that transcended words. They had fought, survived, and in the end, they had found something far greater than victory. They had found home. And in that quiet, simple truth, Keanu Reeves and Buddy knew that, No matter what came next, they were ready to face it together. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this incredible journey. We hope you enjoyed every twist and turn in Keanu and Buddy's story. If you've been inspired or moved by their bond, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more heartwarming stories and exciting adventures like this one. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue creating content that you love. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep fighting for what matters. We'll see you in the next story.